All right, I think we've got just about everybody who's in the hall coming in now. So we will get started. I want to say welcome to everybody and thank you for coming today. And I'll be trying to speak closely. Thanks for the signals. Anyways, we're glad that you joined us at this town hall style meeting. Thank you for joining us at this town hall style meeting addressing community housing. And I'd like to start off by introducing everyone on the panel. Everyone should know Fred Field, our New York State Assemblyman, who drafted the legislation that enables the town. He drafted the legislation that enables the town to put the funding for the transfer tax on the community housing plan on the ballot for this November. Taylor Gardner. She's one of our consultants from Nelson Pope Voorhees, who helped draft the community housing plan. We have Elizabeth Hanley, who is our chair of both the Community Housing Board and the Community Housing Fund Advisory Board. We have Brand Dowdy Johnson, Maria Magenti, and Peter McCracken, all members of both the Community Housing Board and the Community Housing Fund Advisory Board. Myself, I'm the Town Board Liaison to the Community Housing Board and the Community Housing Fund Advisory Board. And then, not on the panel, we have Mary Eisenstein, a Mattituck resident, who is a professional facilitator, and she will be moderating our meeting today. At this point, I would like Mary to go over the format and expectations for running today's meeting.
Good afternoon, everyone. My role today is that of a facilitator. And a facilitator's major role is to manage a meeting so that as many people as possible can speak. This easel up here, in case you can't see it, the title says A Successful Meeting. So a few of the steps to take to have a successful meeting. Today, we will ask you to please raise your hand if you wish to speak. I will identify you to come down, and if you would sit down here on the front row, and then when you get up to speak, you are going to speak here. Please identify yourself, your name, and then the question or statement. The other aspect of my role in managing time is that I will perhaps clarify a statement or a question and then ask you where you would like to direct what it is that you're saying. Now, the meeting has been allotted for 2 hours. However, if everyone is heard, then we'll go have scallops at the Lions. So, at this point, I will turn it back over to Amber.
Before we get started, today's meeting is focused solely on community housing. The town has drafted a community housing plan, and that should be what we spend most of our time on today. But it is a requirement in order to spend any funds from the community housing fund. We have to have this plan in place. And Fred will go over that a little bit when he speaks next. But the goal for today is to answer questions and clear up any misconceptions, questions, things that might be out in the public, and to give you all a chance to be heard. On that note, I would like to start with Fred Field giving us an overview of the referendum.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here. I never turned down an opportunity to come to Shelter Island, so I really appreciate the invitation, and especially about such an important subject as this. And I'll say this at the outset: when you see me, if this does run 2 hours, when you see me get up and leave at 20 after 4, I'm not making any kind of editorial comment. It's because I have to do the exact same thing that I'm doing now in East Hampton at 5 o'clock. So, which I hope ends in time for me to come back to Shelter Island for the scallops. So, but let me get to this, and I'm going to talk about the state legislation that was adopted that authorizes this referendum, and just talk a little bit about that. And, let me just say at the outset, it is state enabling legislation giving permissive authority to local governments. In this case, the 5 East End towns, just the same, East Hampton, Southampton, Shelter Island, Southold, and Riverhead. The bill applies to those 5 towns, and as I said, it's permissive. It is not a state mandate. There's lots of talk from local governments about when they get mandates from the state that they have to do something. In fact, there are bills in Albany that I've actually blocked in my committee, which has attempted to usurp local authority when it comes to housing. This is not a state mandate. It is a local option. And the bill that finally was enacted into law was drafted in conjunction with the 5 East End towns up front. We met with the various housing directors and housing liaisons, etc., several times. Some of them also during the pandemic, kind of a Zoom meeting. But the bill and the way it was finally drafted was in conjunction, working with the towns ahead of time to be able to do that. So the state's role was to provide authority to local government, to the 5 towns. The town's role is whether or not to decide whether or not they want to utilize the authority that they've been given. So the town has to pass a local law. They have to do a housing plan. I'll get into a little bit of that in a few minutes. But ultimately, the way the bill is drafted is that the state has a role, the town has a role, but the final say goes to the voters in each of the towns, because the ability to impose the extra 0.5% real estate transfer tax and the increase in the exemption ultimately is up to the voters in each town. Trust me, I've been in Albany for a while. The amount of times that I can count where the state legislature allowed the public to vote on the imposition of the tax, I can count 2. This bill and the Community Preservation Fund. So, it was really designed, these are decisions that affect communities, and the ultimate decision should be with the community, subject to public mandatory referendum, which is what is scheduled for November 8th in 4 of the 5 towns. So why did we do this bill? How did we get to this bill? I'm just going to talk about 3 points that I think there probably won't be a lot of disagreement on, at least on these points. And the one is housing need. Whether it's the Office of the State Controller, the County Planning Commissions, the local planning that's been done in each of the towns, they all have information. I'm sure certain Nelson Pope and Voorhees will talk about housing needs, so I'm not going to get into a lot of it, other than to say, those studies are helpful because they help to quantify the problem, but I don't think any of us needed a study to tell us that there's an issue with regard to housing need. All I have to do is walk down Main Street in any one of the hamlets or towns that I represent. And I can go from business to business, and probably on 2 out of every 3 doors, there's a help wanted sign because people can't find employees. I go over to either Eastern Long Island or Southampton Hospital. They'll tell me how they're having difficulty hiring nurses or radiologists. Southampton Hospital, I know, has about 200 vacancies as far as employees go. Emergency services. The ability of volunteer fire departments and the ambulance services to be able to still attract volunteers. On the South Fork, if you take a ride on County Road 39 in the morning, you'll see the traffic, and it backs up, and we have that traffic because people have jobs here, they can't afford to live here. Virtually every issue that we deal with in government, whether it be on the state level or local level, when it relates to the East End, somehow deals with affordable housing. If you talk about emergency services, eventually the discussion comes around to affordable housing. You talk to families and the ability of their kids to come back, it always comes back to affordable housing. So this, I think, has been exacerbated by the pandemic, as the pandemic exacerbated life trends out there. Housing prices are up, inventory is down, and there's less housing than ever available for local families. What are some of the causes of how we got into this? I think biggest thing, and anybody who's in real estate knows this, it's location, location, location. Not only do we live in one of the most beautiful places on the planet, but we live in close proximity to about 20 million people in the New York metropolitan area. An area also that has a high concentration of wealth and people who have the ability to afford second homes. And a lot of this simply has been the ability of those who would like to buy a second home to be able to out-compete for the housing stock local families who are just trying to buy a first home. And I think that is the need in a nutshell. I'm not going to talk any more about need. Secondly, is the towns and villages have a legal responsibility here. You've got a state court of appeals decision that's been the law of the land for almost 50 years. And every time the town does any amendment to their zoning ordinance or their zoning law, the test is the town provided a properly balanced, well-ordered plan for the community, are present and future housing needs of all town residents being met, and whether or not regional needs have been considered. So the courts require that zoning ordinances and zoning land use plans take into account present and future needs for all members of the community and their needs for housing. And, communities that haven't done that at other locations have ended up with courts mandating them to do something. That's not something we want to have here. And then the final point that I want to simply make before I get into some of the outline of the legislation is the current model doesn't work. The status quo doesn't work. What we're doing now doesn't provide housing for all the members of our community that need it. It is a failure. Towns are doing their best to try to meet that, but they simply don't have the resources to be able to do that. What is this failed model that we see across the East End and across Long Island? Well, housing is expensive. And the way that they try to drive down the cost of housing is by increasing density. And almost all of these projects you're seeing, on the East End that you're seeing have substantial density increases to try to make them more affordable. Well, there's two issues with that. One is our comprehensive plans also want to protect water quality and open space and farmland and community character. And if you're increasing density, you're impacting those other parts of the comprehensive plan. And second, increasing density isn't really popular in places in the East End. People are here for a reason. They like the community character. They buy a house. They don't want to see suddenly the character of the neighborhood change after they buy a house. That's what we do now, and it's a failure. It doesn't work. So we need to look at other options, and that's why this legislation came about, because we needed to look at other options. Ed Romaine, town supervisor in Brookhaven, used to be county clerk, county legislature. I think he represented Shelter Island at one point in time. He says all decisions of government are about money. And that may be not 100% true, but it's largely true. And if you're trying to reduce and put together a program for affordable housing, and you don't want to substantially increase density, you've got to subsidize it in other ways. And that's what this community housing fund was all about. That's why the way it was drafted the way it was. It is a different model that provides resources to be able to provide housing without having to explode with an increase in density to be able to do that. Now, I'm just going to give a quick overview and then I'll turn it over as far as how the bill works. It is the sister of the Community Preservation Fund. There's two parts of it. One is raising the revenue, and it increases the real estate transfer tax by 0.5%. It would go from 2% to 2.5%, but they're separated. The 2% goes for land and water, and the other 0.5% goes for community housing. And we're also increasing the exemption. Right now, there's no exemption on the first there's no tax on the first $250,000. This would increase that to $400,000. And when you kind of, do all of the math, with the increase in the rate and the increase in the exemption, what it boils down to is that real estate transfer actions of $1 million or less would actually pay less under the new law than they do under the current Community Preservation Fund Act. So that's how it's funded with the real estate transfer tax. We looked at all sorts of different ideas about revenue and how to raise it. A McMansion tax, a real estate speculation tax, all these things. There was somebody who hated all of these. There's no tax that everybody's going to love. I can assure you that. I've been doing this for a long time. But what we did find, and ultimately, when we did the Community Preservation Fund in 1998, it was opposed by the builders and it was opposed by the realtors because they didn't want a tax on their industry. But when we looked at all of the options, after 25 years of the CPF, people have gotten pretty used to the Community Preservation Fund and the real estate transfer tax. They view it as a positive. I occasionally will do a real estate closing from time to time. People always like to complain to me about the closing costs. They'll complain about the mortgage recording tax or estate transfer tax or title insurance. They never complain about the Peconic 2% real estate transfer tax. They look at it as insurance for the future of their community. So ultimately, there was a movie. If you ever saw the movie Argo, it was the movie where they were getting the hostages out of Iran, and they had to come up with an idea how to do that. And they ultimately decided they were going to masquerade as a film crew and bring the hostages out. Had to sell it to the CIA that this was the best way to go. And basically, they said, "Well, all the ideas are bad, but this is the best bad idea we had." And that's the way it is with taxes. Nobody loves taxes, but this is the best idea of all of them that we had to be able to fund this. And ultimately, that's where the consensus came down. So the revenue side of this is the transfer tax. To be able to, the money goes to a dedicated fund, just like the Community Preservation Fund, except for housing. And we drafted it as broadly as we possibly could, because we wanted to give towns as much flexibility as possible. What might work in East Hampton isn't going to work in Shelter Island. What Southold may like, Riverhead may not. And I live in Southampton, so who knows, right? But every town is different. The needs are different. We didn't expand or contract the authority that the town has with regard to affordable housing. We just gave them the resources to be able to do it. And they get to decide what is the best way for the community. We require that the law requires that a plan has to be done, and that's really what this meeting is all about, is each town trying to put a plan together to let the public know what their intentions are. You can't have exact specificity. When we did the Community Preservation Fund, we had general ideas and parcels and areas that we thought should be preserved. But I couldn't know then, and nobody could know then, who the willing buyers were going to be. We couldn't know whether you get an agreement on the value or what public sentiment might be as far as what the important parcels are. But we tried to give the general philosophy and standards that were going to be applied. Same thing with this year's $4.2 billion Environmental Bond Act. That's proposal number one. We've got general categories in there, but I can't tell you which open space project or which drainage project is going to be spent on. So, there's a certain level of information that I think everybody needs, and they need to know what the priorities are in the community. Is it rental housing or home ownership? Do you favor public-private partnerships? Do you want to look at financial assistance to first-time home buyers so they can afford existing housing stock? There's an endless number of those questions. And what this plan, the purpose of it was to get the towns to focus on which one of these tools they think might be most productive working with the community. There's an advisory committee that needed to be created with the legislation. And, ultimately, state legislation, town board passes a local law, town works on a plan with their advisory committee, there's a vote, and, you will get the final say on November 8th. So that is kind of my broad overview of what type of legislation this is, why it got drafted the way that it got drafted. It was really designed to give you really kind of the maximum discretion and the final decision about what you want your community to look like. You know, I live in Sag Harbor. I've lived there all my life. My family's been out here a long time, not as long as Cliff Clark's family's been out here, but for a while. And, you know, I care passionately about what my community is going to look like over the next 10 to 20 years. But I don't live on Shelter Island. I care about Shelter Island. But the decisions about whether or not to do this, and if so, how to do it, should be made by Shelter Islanders. And that's the way we designed the bill. And we've empowered all of you to be part of the process. And I thank you all for being here to exercise that right as citizens to be part of the process. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you, assembled in the field. For those of you who just came in, my name is Mary Eisenstein, and I'm facilitating today's meeting. In order to have a successful meeting, we all agreed that we would raise our hands, come down, sit in the front. I'll identify you to come down, stand up at the podium, state your name, ask your question. If you know who you're directing it to, please direct it. And the other part of what I do in terms of managing time is perhaps clarify some statements or questions to the panel. So let's get started. Who would like to? So come on down here, sit here. The person in blue, come on down. Anyone, sir? You could sit right here. Yep. And then we'll do this repeatedly after each person has spoken. So, ma'am, you're number one. So, knock it out of the ballpark.
I'm going to lower this just because I'm
Sure.
Hi, Catherine Brigham. So my question is, do we have a sense of the cost and impact of not moving forward right now with the transfer tax and the housing plan? What would the effect of not addressing this immediately be on the community? And this is for Assemblyman Thiel, and Ms. Barnard, if you would like to jump in as well.
Thank you very much. You can go back to your seat. Thank you.
Well, I think the only part of that question that I can probably address is maybe the revenue impact. I'm not going to get into how the town would use the revenue and how that might impact them. But we first passed this bill in 2019, and the former governor vetoed it. In my opinion, one of his many mistakes. But we brought it. We left it alone in 2020. We're in the middle of the pandemic. We brought it back in 2021, and I mentioned that only because across the 5 East End towns, we probably lost about $50 million that it could have gone to affordable housing if it had passed. But this is a town-by-town issue. Shelter, it's very hard to estimate revenues because the transfer tax can be somewhat volatile. Before the Great Recession in 2007, across the 5 East End towns, the Community Preservation Fund generated about $95 million. 2 years later, when the Great Recession, we were in the middle of it, dropped to $40 million. And then, in 2019, it generated $77 million. And between 2019, when it generated $77 million, and 2021, it went from $77 million to $210 million. So, I'm going to use kind of averages of what the fund generated between the end of the Great Recession and before the pandemic came, because that was kind of a more normal, and maybe someday there will be a new normal, and we'll know what that is. But Shelter Island generates, in an average year, under the existing Community Preservation Fund, generates, between $2 and $3 million a year. Sometimes it's more, and sometimes it's less, but that's been kind of the average. So figure about a quarter of that, maybe a little bit less because we're increasing the exemption. So, somewhere between $500,000 to $750,000 a year. And that's an estimate, it's an average. But, if you're looking at it from a dollars and cents perspective, And the longer you wait, I mean, that's probably the opportunity cost. And I can't speak to how that money would get used. I leave that to the town. The other thing that I should have mentioned that I didn't is that there is a sunset on this bill. The tax for this, the revenue generating capacity, expires in 2050. So there's basically from now, it's like 28 years. The other thing I should mention, I'm not endorsing this or opposing this, but the towns also have the ability to borrow against the future revenues to this. So, at the beginning of the community preservation funds, a lot of towns, because they needed to preserve the land before it disappeared, they borrowed money up front and, they're paying off the debt service. That idea looked a lot better before interest rates and mortgage rates went from 3% to 7%. So I think, towns will have to assess all of that. But, from a revenue perspective, you're probably looking at each year is probably worth between $500,000 and $750,000 on average. And we're recognizing the fact that that's the same thing as saying that the average depth of the stream is 3 feet deep, except that, if it's 12 feet in the middle, you're in a different situation. But that's the best estimate that I can give.
Taylor, do you want to take a shot at that?
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me? Good enough? Great. Okay. I think, Mr. Theo explained what you were looking for, probably with the revenue side of it. But we do have in the plan an entire needs assessment that looks at trends on Shelter Island from 2000 through 2020. And in there you'll see some pretty telling statistics about the situation for renters and how more and more of their household income is going towards their rent. The metric we used was something called cost burden. That's a definition straight from the United States Department of Housing. And they define that as if a household is spending more than 30% of their income on housing, they are cost burdened. And what we've seen is the situation for renters, based on the data from the census, is that more and more renters on Shelter Island are cost burdened. Going from something around 19-20% of renters being cost burdened in the year 2000 to the most recent estimates are actually that all renters are cost burdened. There is always a margin of error with this data, and that's why we've been important to look at the overall trends rather than relying on any particular number. But you look at all these things together and it does tell a story.
Thank you. Step up. If everyone, when you speak, please speak close to the microphone because this is being recorded. So state your name and your question.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Gooding. I think most of you know my husband, Gordon.
Very well.
We were just wondering, when you made your decisions about the new housing attachment to the preservation plan, you changed the formula for how we get preservation monies. So you added in the exemption, you changed the exemption. And we're looking at those numbers, and we're seeing that in the future, we will be receiving less money for preservation and water quality. Not that we're receiving more than housing, but we will be receiving less than we would be receiving under the existing formula. It goes down. And water quality is our biggest concern. Mm-hmm. And the housing initiative, you said 100,000.
Well, it's not the housing initiative per se, it's the increase in the exemption.
Right. But the housing group would be getting about $100,000 more than our water quality group if we stuck with that 100 million number that you had mentioned earlier. Okay. So I need, for us with water quality, that's a big concern.
I'm going to try to address that. And, first of all, the exemption is $250,000. It's been $250,000 since 1998. We picked that number in 1998 because that was the median cost of a house on the South Fork and Shelter Island in 1998. Now, if we were going to increase the exemption to what the median cost of a house is now, we would really be putting a dent in the revenue. But that exemption needed to be increased, and we increased it. So it should have been increased whether or not there was a housing fund or not. And you're right. If you increase the exemption, it takes a little bit of the revenue away. I don't think it's a substantial amount, but it does. But the other thing that also helps to increase the revenue is that under the old exemption, you got the first $250,000 off, whether your house cost $1 million or it costs $50 million. You still got the exemption. We're now limiting the exemption to sales under $2 million. So that also increases the revenue. So, there is a small net loss to Community Preservation Fund revenue, but I would argue, and certainly the argument was made to me many times, that if there was no housing fund, the level of that exemption needed to be increased because it hadn't been increased in 25 years. And second, we focused the exemption more on the people that are buying the more affordable housing who need the exemption. So your answer, your question is right. There's going to be a slight decrease, but the exemption and the need for increasing that exemption was quite frankly long overdue.
Thank you. So,
Can I, is it all right if I add, Elizabeth Hanley? That's such a great question, and I wanted you to know that I actually did the math on it. I actually did the math because I thought, hey, we have to have a data set that we can draw on. So I did the math, and I went through and I said, okay, 2021, because that's when we had the last audited data for home sales. And what I came up with is that the delta, the difference, going to the Community Preservation Fund, because I think we all agree that water is such a huge priority, and the amazing work that's been done with the Community Preservation Fund, the delta that would have not gone into the Community Preservation Fund had this legislation, at these exemption levels and all that, been in place in 2021, was just shy of $50,000 was the difference.
Yeah, just one point I didn't make, I just wanted to briefly make. Right now, the law, the way it's written, is up to 20% can be used for water quality. That's kind of the cap. It's still a land preservation program with a water quality component to it, and the voters voted 80% of the vote to add that water quality component. There is some discussion, and I have heard certainly from all of the towns about perhaps we should provide more flexibility for water quality, and perhaps there's a need to increase that 20%. But, if you spend more for water quality, it's less for land preservation. But maybe give towns more flexibility. I know, as I say, each town is different, but I know there's an increased focus on incentivizing IA systems. There are some parts of the East End where they're looking at sewage treatment plants where water quality, spending water quality funds, and might be better. There's less land left on the South Fork than there is on the North Fork. So, their focus is still on land preservation, but where there's less land available, there may be more focus on water quality. So, the other thing I should just wanted to leave you with is that the idea of giving a little bit more flexibility to provide funding for water quality is something that we are thinking about.
thank you. Go ahead, sir.
My name is Peter Canford. I just wanted to clear up a misconception on behalf of many of us who have been on the nose side of this issue. We have never been against housing for critical infrastructure workers to island residents, health, safety, and welfare. And a referendum is not required to provide them with housing. We've stated this over and over again, yet I continue to see letters in the newspaper that say that we are opposed to it, and that is false. What we have been against and opposed is issuing a blank check for what amounts to a blank slate of a plan. After all this time, the plan is very amorphous. There's a lot of vagueness to it. No bank in their right mind would issue a check for a plan that is this big, and I think it's highly premature that we could be voting on it at this particular time. I would just like to conclude that I wish I could recall the lady's name, but she wrote a very well-researched a written letter that was in the Reporter back several months ago about existing housing stock on the island that is not being used. I have never seen that issue addressed, and I'd like to know if the board has looked into that. Thank you.
And would you like anyone in particular to answer that question?
No one in particular.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anyone want to take that?
Well, hi, my name's Maria. The housing plan actually does have that outlined, sir. So there is actually in our housing plan draft a conversation about, for instance, one of the things that could be used from the fund is rehabbing homes that are not being used currently, that are vacant. So that is indeed one of the suggestions that we have in our draft.
Thank you. Next group that would like to come, sir, number 1, sir, number 2. Anyone over here? 3. So why don't you go up, state your name, and then question or statement, and you'll be number 2, and you'll be number 3. Thank you.
Assemblyman, I'm Bob Cohn. I'm not sure if you meet some people.
And could you just speak into their
Okay, thank you. I was led to believe that people would have a little more time to make some statements, but I think you can take the statements that I'll be making as questions for you to ponder and answer if you'd like to address them. I'm not going to be addressing specifically the referendum because I think a number of civic groups in town have done one that I'm part of, that I have support for, multiple page ads in the newspaper that explain our viewpoint on the referendum. The only thing I'd like to say about that is that, again, as Mr. Camper just pointed out, this is not about building a few houses for EMS and volunteer firefighters and other kind of infrastructure workers. We certainly have the resources, or we can get a state grant for the resources to do that. The referendum, as you said, is 28 years long, of raising about, you said, $750,000 a year. We'll increase that by 2% over 28 years. You get a very large number, which you can borrow against. We're talking about a very significant amount of money for an ever-increasing amount of housing. Now, the plan, or the so-called plan, it's not a plan. People, if you just read the plan, you'll find out it's not a plan. I've been on the board of directors of public corporations. I was the chairman of one. I was vice chairman of another. If anyone presented a plan to me that didn't say what you're going to do and what you're not going to do, I would say go back to the drawing board. That this plan does not say, especially it does not say what you are not going to do. And let me just point it out. I'm going to page 18 when it finally starts talking about objectives and recommendations. And it doesn't say what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. It just makes objectives and recommendations. Things like main priority is to have at least 10 new units. At least. There's no, people were talking about 20 to 40 a couple weeks ago. Now you're talking about at least 10. It makes it sound small, but where's the maximum? How many units, will you? If you need to use more units, say in the plan we're going to only build 10, and that will have another referendum for more. That might be difficult, but you have to justify it when the time comes. For example, another one, expanding rental units rather than for sale units. You talked about that. That is a short-term goal, but on the next page, in the medium-term goal, it says the potential for adding for sale units to the community housing. Now, you did a survey, and most people in this town said, we don't want for sale units. But your plan says, the page after you say you're not going to do it, it says that you could expand it. So if you're going to answer the community, you would say, we're not going to do that unless we come back to the community and ask. Another example, it talks about options to be explored in connection with the management and how this is going to be managed. It talks about including a lottery from a list of eligible individuals. Okay, well, somewhere else, like on the town brochure, an eligible individual can be earning as much for a household $181,860 or $150,000. A single person can make $155,000 and they get potentially, but there's no procedure, there's no process, there's no information, no limitations, no conditions in this plan as to how that's going to work. I don't know how anyone can vote on a referendum that gives that much money to a blank check on that issue. Let's go on. It says on the next page, ongoing objectives. One of them is to select a management partner. There's no plan. There's no detail. There are rumors going around town, but supervisors talk to people who I don't even know, like someone named Calabro and someone named Marco, and potentially someone like George Soros. Are those partners we're looking at? You know, you've got to say in the plan, what are you going to do? What kind of partner you're looking for, okay? Senior population on Shelter Island is increasing. Okay, so most of them own their own homes. And if their property taxes increase as a result of this, their homes become unaffordable. You have in the exhibit an increasing age of the people on Shelter Island. That means there's going to be an increasing number of people on fixed incomes, including myself. Okay, I'm 65 now, and I'm ready. Maybe I'm on my last gig, but I'm going to be there. I'm on a fixed income, and I don't want to see my property taxes go up faster than my increase in Social Security. I've been told it's misinformation. It is a lie to suggest that property taxes can't be increased because this is a 0.5% transfer tax. But that doesn't take into consideration the consequences of the referendum and the plan that's being put together here. You can't say that the potential consequences is misinformation or a lie. I had the supervisor of this town call me a liar for trying to point out the consequences.
What are the consequences? I'm not clear.
Well, I'm not going to. Let me just talk to the plan. I will get to that if you give me time. Okay. There's another part here that talks about creative solutions. Well, this is finally the ongoing objectives include implementing creative solutions for increasing community housing. Is that a plan? That's not a plan. Midterm, okay. 5 to 10 years, main goal, 10 additional units, okay. No limits, nothing. Options for expanding rental units will continue to be explored. Okay, there is no plan. Now, you get to the part where it talks about recommendations. You have town-owned land. Now you're going to put rental units on town-owned land. People don't pay property taxes. Nobody pays property taxes on town-owned land. You have 2,000 people full-time on this island. You add 200 people into the housing stock who work on town land. Guess who pays for their EMS, for their fire, for their school, for everything else? It's going to be everybody who owns property, including those people on fixed income, which your plan says is going to increase and has increased over time.
So, excuse me one second. Finally? Okay.
You do have support for accessory dwelling units. You just mentioned that, right? But where in the world it says you can, on accessory dwelling units, you can just change the town code to deal with that. This is private property, okay? You don't need to have a referendum if it's up to 28 years to change the town code. There is, of course, you say that the standards can be designed in a way that can be expanded if necessary infrastructure becomes available. If you don't have certain water infrastructure, we can't build it there. But then the plan says, if we add water infrastructure, we can use money now to increase the density of the housing in the area.
So, sir, you've had 5 minutes, which is brilliant, but what I'm hearing you say is you're asking for clarification. And one of the reasons for this meeting, you're bringing up items that you would like the people here to pay attention to, is what I hear you saying.
Partially correct.
Okay.
But partially, because I think that there are no answers in the plan. Okay. I don't care what answers they have, okay, unless I see it in the plan.
So I think you've made yourself very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. Number two. Go ahead. Does anyone like to say something?
I think, Bob, it does seem like that you're not interested in our answers, so I don't know if that's helpful for you. Did you want to?
Yeah. Do you want a specific answer?
Did you want to ask a question to us on this, or?
I had a question in terms of the future consequences that I'm not really clear on what you mean.
Well, one of the consequences I had mentioned is that if you build property, rentals, portable rentals on town-owned property,
you have to rent it as an affordable rate. So it's probably going to be as much as or less than the operating costs of those units. It's going to be people who don't own them, there might be damage to them, there might be all kinds of things. Okay? So they're not paying property taxes. The town's not paying property taxes. But the people who live in those units use fire, EMS, Rose, and all the other towns. That is a consequence of raising this much money to build that much housing on town property. There should be something in the plan that says you would never build rentals on town property. Build it on private property so someone's paying property taxes to the people who live there.
Thank you for that clarification.
One of the functions, and Fred, you can answer this, but one of the functions that I understand about the Community Housing Fund is that it is a fund, and it would be used in a wide range of possibilities. Perhaps one of those possibilities is taking care of the management and development of such rentals. So I don't necessarily see a direct relationship between that and anybody's taxes going up.
Well, don't you see that when someone is renting on town-owned property that none of those renters pay taxes, and there's no property owner to pay taxes. There's no property taxes there. You have an increased amount of people using more resources that everybody else who does pay property taxes will be supporting those people, and those people can be earning as much as $181,000 a year, and that number goes up every year over 28 years. So is it fair?
As does all costs.
Fine. So is it fair to ask someone on a retirement person?
That is a larger philosophical question.
Not philosophical.
I just want to make sure I understand.
Thank you. Yes, I think that the point that he is making on that last point is that if it's town-owned property and something's going to go in there, that if I'm hearing you correctly, and they are not paying as someone who owns a piece of property somewhere else on there, or renting. I believe that's what you're saying. Okay, thank you very much. So that's to be looked at and clarified is what I'm hearing him say. Yes? Okay. So, sir, your name and question.
My name is Brett Ferreras. Excuse me. And I used to eat my sandwiches at Feeney's, which is a Dan Calabro property. I would like to thank the volunteers. I know what it's like to be right in front of everybody getting fired upon. So well done, and thank you for everything that you do to keep this community rolling forward. The initial draft housing plan is not a final plan, I suspect. There are things we have to do to make it better, like everything else. I assume it's not the penultimate plan. We have a few drafts coming, and we're going to be working on ideas together. I like that. Do we have a sense of what it would cost to fund a private EMS and private fire department? If that was to come to fruition, if we needed something like that, has anybody done research on that?
Yes.
What would that cost you?
So, I mean, what we do know. So let's start with what we do know. So recently, and Amber, you jump in if I get this number wrong. We have had to bring in an EMT for one shift a week. That costs the community $225,000.
In the current year budget for 2022, we have $132,000, and that's doubling for 2023.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think I'm thinking the 2020.
12-hour coverage to 24-hour coverage, but that's only one person.
Those probably sound like large numbers.
Yeah,
Yes,
they are.
What do you think the overall cost is?
Well, let's think about how many EMTs and fire department we have if we had to replace them all. I mean, I think that the rough estimates, if you were to lose volunteers, I can't imagine that it would be anywhere less than $5 million. That would be.
Well, I can't even speak.
Could be 10, yes.
Yeah, I can't even speak to the fire district side because
Could be 10.
But Peter, how many people do we need just on an EMS call? Is it 3, 4 people in general? Okay, so that's $1 million right there. Yeah, and that's $1 million without the Southampton and hospital subsidy. They're subsidizing half of it.
That's starting to sound like the size of the school budget. Is that about right?
It would be very significant.
Is it worth pointing out that some of the opponents to the affordable housing also want the school closed ultimately?
Thank you. You, sir, identify yourself and question. And then the next group pay attention, and after he's finished, we'll close down. And I just want you to pay attention to the fact that it's 4 o'clock, and we want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to come up and say something. Thank you. Into the mic.
Well, thank you guys for stepping up.
State your name.
I would like to thank you guys for stepping up and doing the work that you're doing. I don't have so much a question as a statement. Fred, you had talked about the importance of community character. I always thought that the most important part of this community was its diversity. And if we don't encourage people to stay here, young people, young families, ultimately I'd like to see housing for seniors too. We're not going to have a community. There are some people who don't see any value in community. I recall going to a meeting and listening to somebody say that it didn't really count for much. But I think that you all believe that community does have value, that sense of community. One of the things that I would point out, one of the people that was just up here said something about houses being built on community property, and who's going to pay to maintain that? Well, as the president for maintaining community property, we do it with the land that we've acquired. So I would assume that there will be some money in the kitty to do maintenance on whatever kind of a plan that we come up with. I have good faith that you will come up with a plan, a good plan. And I don't want to, I'm afraid that if we don't act on this referendum now, we're not going to act on it later. It'll just die. So, keep doing what you're doing. Keep fighting for what you think is right. Other people certainly are fighting for what they think is right. I still understand the reason, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Come on down. Come on down. Yes. So please speak into the mic so everybody can hear. So you go first, and then you, and sir. And speak into the mic. Linda Hacker. My question is, to a lot of people, this is just being presented as this is just preliminary and we're just getting the funding. But my question is, once we vote on this, are you going to come back to us? I mean, Brett just said we work on the plan, we do this, we do that. Are you going to come back to us and do we get to vote on this? Because I was looking at this morning. It is vague. It's very, very broad. And that's as a preliminary thing, it's okay, but we're talking about giving you, as it keeps being mentioned, a blank check. It's a lot of money. And there's no mechanism in here for the board, for the town board, for you guys to have to come back to us and say, is this what you want? So now that you have the money, is this what you want? So would you like Amber to answer that question? And the question is, are you going to come back to us if this passes for any kind of...
Well, I'm saying, is there any mechanism in here that says that?
Okay. Thank you. Amber,
so the process is that the referendum is for whether or not to impose the 2.5% tax. With the mask, I keep forgetting. The referendum is on imposing the 0.5% tax. So that is something that the public will definitely vote on. The housing plan itself is in the town board's hands. So we're having a public hearing on Tuesday besides this forum, which was a broader forum to give people more time than is normal in our regular public hearing venue, to hear more comments. But then the Tuesday night meeting, approximately 6:12, will be an opportunity for people to come again before the full town board and talk about various comments on the housing plan itself. From that, the town board will need to decide whether or not we need to incorporate some more comments and send it back to the Community Housing Fund Advisory Board, which is charged with drafting this plan for us, tweaking it. Then it would go for another public hearing, and it is always going to be voted on by the town board. So it's not.
Can I speak to?
I promise not to jump in on these things, but your question is a process question, so I just want to kind of amplify on it a little bit. Well, do they have to come back, and what's the process? So that's the part of your question I'm going to talk to. And the plan has to be, first of all, has to involve the advisory committee, so the advisory committee is involved in this. But the adoption of the plan has to be done by local law, which means there has to be a public hearing. Any amendment has to be accomplished by local law, which means you have to go back to the public in a public hearing. But as Amber said, what triggers the referendum is the tax, not the plan. So, yeah.
Microphone.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Kelsey McIntosh. When I look at the room, there's about 4 people under the age of 40 that are here. I am one of them. And those people don't make enough money to buy a house on the island. So right now, if you look at being able to buy a house, you have to make $250,000 to qualify for a mortgage. On top of that, you need to come up with a $200,000 down payment. Now, as a business owner, as a successful business, that most of my products, flowers and tomatoes, are in your home. I create a niche experience for most people that come to the island. Is it the best job I could have chosen? No, I could have done something else, but it's what I'm good at. And you know what? Me and my partner, we have hit such a high number that we're happy with, and it's still not enough because in order to expand our business, we have to get more people at full-time wages and pay them enough to be able to pay their rent and to live here. And it's still not enough. And so my wages keep going down because I need to pay my workers more, and they don't even get to climb the ladder of what I'm doing. So this housing tax is a drop in the bucket for this community. We can do it. People just want to live here. They just want to make something of themselves and add to the community. We're not voting on the housing plan, we're voting on the tax. And let's just trust the community that for the next 27 years, we're going to help people suffer less and be able to keep this community the reason why everybody wants to live here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Evan Gilliman. It's very tough to follow that act, and I couldn't agree more with it. We've been coming out to Shelter Island for probably 30 years, my wife and my family. We've owned a home out here for a little over 20. And the reason I live here is because it's a diverse community with a lot of different kinds of people. I volunteer with EMS. I don't get out as much and ride as much as I should, but I will tell you I spend a ton of time with those people. They are remarkable. It's a great service. They are people who care about their community. They work 3 jobs, and then they go out, at night, at midnight, when the party's not even running, to go out and take calls. They're great people. We should be doing everything we can possibly do to support them. And you can't do that just to somebody else's point here, just by building one small house for an EMS person. You got to have a fund that works, that has a longevity to it. Right? And it's not just EMS and providers, it's also small businesses. I also volunteer in Queens, and when I go out on a call in Queens, the way you can service somebody is so much different than here. Right? You go to Queens and you're going to a stranger's house, it's really hard to know how to diagnose them, what to do. the folks who work here, they know the community, they know the people, they come out every day and see them. It's a whole different level of involvement, and that's true for businesses, it's true for fire, it's true for teachers, it's true for the police force out here, which is so different than the police force in 99% of the country. We need to make sure that persists. I am totally, and I also have sat on public company boards, and in fact, sit on boards today. The plan you guys put together, to me, is very good. It's not precise, it doesn't have every detail in it, but no plan does or should. We got to vote on taking action. We do it now, or we're losing revenues for the next, God knows how long. And then we got to count on you all to get it right. And this is a community that gets it right mostly. There's a lot of discord, people have different opinions, but over the 30 years I've been here, this place does a good job and takes care of people. So with all of that, that's my preamble. I do have one question. I would love to know more about what we could do in terms of private-public partnership, which I think would be a way to get more capital in here, pay much greater property taxes, right? If you can bring in some private capital, that's going to help to build new houses, and those capital providers are going to be paying a lot more property taxes, which in fact will lower revenues, individual resident property taxes. So I'm curious what you guys think.
What would you like to address that question?
We could do in terms of public-private partnership, and I don't know if that would be Assemblyman Teal or somebody else on the board.
I can address this part of it, is that it is authorized by the law to be able to do public-private partnerships. I think when it was drafted, what was contemplated there, especially related to employee situations, so employee housing and working with the private sector, whether it's in the hospitality industry or on the North Fork, maybe the agricultural industry. But there's no limit, so it isn't just employee housing, but it's certainly that language is in the statute, and that would be an option that would be available. So that part of it I can talk to.
The Community Housing Board would love to talk to private capital. Come find us.
Thank you. More questions, sir? Come on down. Sir, come on down. Sir, ma'am, in the red, come on down. You're up. And identify yourself and be close to the mic. Thank you.
My name is Paul Udon, and I've been coming to Shelter Island for 40 years. I started out here working for a friend. He built a house for him, and then another extension on top of that. I've waited for many, many years to get the opportunity to find an ability to come out here from Queens and own a house. I had a little downtime, and property became available. I spent my life savings on building a house here. I'm going to be one of those nasty persons who sell the second home and live here. But Shelter Island is a wonderful, wonderful place. I've been having the desire to come here for all these years, and my family also. What I am concerned, though, is I had this feeling, and I've known a lot of the locals over the years, and talking by the water cooler, the thing is, the town council is not considered up front. I would not leave a blank checkbook at the town council meeting. This is the problem. With many, many people with centers, is that we don't believe that the influx of money over the next 28 years is going to be spent as what the constituents want. People want housing, but God only knows what will happen afterwards. We've been silenced pretty much at the town council meetings by moving our times down to 3 minutes to talk. Who can have a discourse in 3 minutes? I get 3 minutes, or the town council person uses a minute and a half of that. It's a concern. I don't want to give the town a blank check. Affordable housing, that might work. The say no signs and say, don't pass this, and let's come back and talk affordable housing.
So what you're wanting, the clarification, yes, what I'm hearing you say is, can the town board be more specific to allay what some of the water cooler talk has been? And so the question then is, what can they do to allay that information to give security to the community about what you're raising. I think that's the question you're asking.
Okay, now, and this is going to go over 28 years. How many other town councils are we going to have? Right now, the country's in a little bit of a downturn. When we have a boom, what is the next town council 10 years out going to do with all that revenue? Is this place going to look anything like when I came here 30 years ago? I doubt it. Okay? This here, I was going to open a business. I did a small business plan. This is nonsense. Okay? This is just speculative, or I don't even know how to explain it. It's a start, but it's not there. That's all I have to say. If I offended anybody,
Well, thank you. And this is part of the reason is for people to be able to articulate, give information so that that can be responded to. So, thank you. Okay, sir.
Hello, this is Greg Collier. It's a question. It's a what-if question, and it's actually amazing because it's like one of the yard signs actually brought this to my mind. So closer? Get closer. How's this? If the referendum fails in this November, is that can it be brought back again in a year, for example? I've seen road signs that say, vote no this year, we'll do it in the future. Is there a situation where that can happen, that it would be up for vote again on a referendum?
The towns were given the authority. There is no limit. There's nothing that limits their ability if it fails once to be able to bring it back. That's where the law is written. You have the authority to do it. Obviously, the longer you wait, the less revenue you're going to get. But there's nothing in the law that, for example, the town of Riverhead has decided they didn't put it on the ballot this year. But the town of Brookhaven with the Community Preservation Fund, only town in New York State to not vote for the Community Preservation Fund because it came up they got authority in June of 2008, and the referendum was in November of 2008. If you can think back to what happened in the fall of 2008, it was the beginning of the Great Recession, so voters weren't real happy. But they could have brought it back. They haven't, but they could have brought it back. So the answer to your question is yes. Okay, very thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Kerr. I've been on the island for 52 years. I educated my 3 sons here. They went all through the school. I'm the one that wrote the letter about accessory dwellings. So my question is, and let me just say, I believe in affordable housing. It's a national problem we're all familiar with. But I did write the letter about accessory dwellings. I researched the dwellings on the island, and we have 1,866 accessory dwellings on this island. And my question is really addressed to Councilwoman. I've asked several of the council people at some of the recent housing meetings, why has the town not been aggressive in legalizing a lot of these units? Because of the 1,800 plus units we have, if you legalized even 100 of those units, the rental problem would be solved overnight. And this is something that has been swept under the carpet for decades, and no council person over the last several decades has been able to answer that question to me, why they cannot reach out and get 100 or 200 of these people that have these units, bring their apartments up to code, and make incentives available so that they are affordable for the population they're talking about. And I think that should be done, and the referendum can be postponed until that job is done first. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman?
Yes, that's a very thorny question on a lot of different fronts. One is not sure if that number is correct. I know that's being researched currently to see exactly how many ADUs are out there. There's also a concern that if we start to start to work on enforcement. We've had to beef up the building department so that we can even-handedly enforce across the boards, so that we're not picking on, a certain group or a certain section. Also, once enforcement starts, there's concern that a lot of those ADUs are already being used as rentals. It's just sub rosa, and so if we start to raise them up to a level that everybody's looking at, people may end up taking them off the market because it's going to cost them too much money to bring them up to full compliance. So it is something that does need to be addressed, and we've beefed up the building department recently. We are starting to get a better handle on what the numbers are. Right now, we want to finish the comprehensive plan before we do any sweeping legislative changes. So it is being looked at, but there's a process and treading light.
Thank you. More questions, ma'am, in the back. Come on down. Sir, you're number 2. Number 3. Anyone over here? And just remember to lean into the mic.
Well, I'm Rebecca Mundy, 7 Can you hear me? Closer. Yeah. Hi, Rebecca Mundy, 7 generations into this island. So, Fred, thank you so much for clarifying the importance of how the towns are responsible for addressing this issue. And I want to thank this committee for attacking this very thorny subject. Creating a plan is always difficult, and you have to start somewhere. And I think we've done a really great job of laying out the beginning of something. I want to thank everybody here for bringing up some great topics. We always have to alert our team that there are more questions to answer. I'm for this plan. I'm for the referendum. I think you should all I want to say, you need to turn this microphone around and look at this crowd and say, you need to listen to the entire team here. We're supposed to work together as a community to move something forward. Listen to Fred. It's our responsibility to this island, our community, to address this issue. Bring your questions forward. Build out the right plan that works for all of us. Okay? And we have time to work on that plan and bring it forward to the town board and be successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, let me get personal. I'm Bill Mastro. I want to first thank the town board for actually going along and doing this public forum today. Doing this public forum today, I had asked for this at a meeting with the facilitator, and you responded. So I give you great thanks for that. In terms of hearing everything today, and I've been listening, there are basically 3 areas where I am hearing people say no. The first area, I think, are those people that almost in all instances are against the referendum, no matter what. Unfortunately, I feel that a good deal of that has been mean-spirited and has been disingenuous. But people have the right to be against the referendum. I hear 2 other pieces. First is a distrust of the town board, and that they are taking the referendum as basically a referendum on the town board. I can understand that if you don't particularly like the current town board, but I think that is short-sighted. You have the opportunity next year to vote out the town board or a good deal of them if you don't like it. Try to think more in terms of what this means for the future of the island. And Linda, I loved your question, but I think the answer isn't so much that you get to have another referendum. It's that as the future town boards implement this, if you think they're doing a lousy job, Go tell them and vote them out. And then third, and this is it, I'm sorry, is that you have people who said the plan isn't sufficient. Anyone who knows me knows that I was yelling all summer, get the plan out. I kept saying to Liz, it's true, you need to get the plan out. But the plan is going to always be a working plan. It's always something that's going to be in development. And it's not perfect. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'll stop for now. I have a few more. But I think, oh wait, well, I do have one more, sorry. Just one more point on that last one. In the event that we vote this down, think of what we discourage. Think of the people that put their energy into this, and think of the people that have been sitting around saying, hopefully something passes, I can get something that will leave the island and we will be lost. My original question was going to be what Brett raised about the cost of EMT, the cost of fire. But I think it's broader than that right now. I think we need to vote yes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Jacobs. I'm speaking individually as a relative newbie. It turns out we actually bought our house here 19 years ago today. At this point in the process, I don't have any questions, but I do want to share some concerns about several different aspects of what's been going on. First, about the dialogue and the quality of dialogue. And this is not directed to any of you, but the dialogue on this issue is deteriorating, particularly on Facebook. We have supervisors saying, don't be and then give the first name of one of the leading opponents. We have opponents who are making fun of the first name of one of the board members. That should stop. That's inappropriate. It's hurting the community. As to the substance of the issues here, there is clearly a need for housing. There is clearly a housing problem on the island. It's a threat to individuals, some of whom are here. It's a threat to institutions, including the school, which, unlike fire and EMS, money can't buy. But, having said that, I have two fundamental problems with where we are. And because of those problems, personally, concerns for the housing problem and respect for many of you, all of you, is not sufficient in my mind to justify either the housing plan or voting for the referendum at this time. So what are my problems? First, that this campaign for the plan and for the referendum is taking place without the benefit of a meaningful study or discussion of the goals for development on the island. Now, what does that mean? What are we talking about, or am I talking about in terms of development? Am I talking about affordable housing? Yes, that's part of it. But that's not all of it. I'm also talking about commercial development. I'm talking about mega mansions. This is not just, the development issue is by all means not just about affordable housing. It's a piece of a much bigger issue and problem. And to do this without truly grappling with reconciling the goals for development and consideration for development's impact on the environment and quality of life, I find deeply problematic. So, in my mind, these issues should not be advanced, or the issue of affordable housing should not be advanced on a piecemeal basis, but should be done in connection with the consideration of broader issues by the Comprehensive Plan Group, as well as independent studies by qualified experts as to water, transportation, and other things. As to the plan itself, yes, unlike some of the no signs out there, it is a plan, but it does not, in my mind, confront a variety of really key issues that everybody, including those most in favor of the plan, need to grapple with. For example, eligibility, as I read it, and along the line I've asked a bunch of questions and nobody's disabused me of this idea, eligibility is based solely, when you're talking about rental housing, on income. It doesn't depend on whether you live or have lived within the last 5 years on Shelter Island. It doesn't depend on whether you work on Shelter Island. Anybody in the vicinity who wants affordable housing here and can qualify for the income limits, at least in terms of rental housing, can apply. So what does that mean in terms of...
So if I can just, because it's time,
I'm just
answer that question about eligibility.
Let me just finish. I'm just about done. I'm sorry, I have a lot to say and I speak slowly. But what are the implications of the fact that the demand, particularly from off-islanders, is unquantified and maybe unquantifiable? The housing survey talks about 499 people who live off-island and work off-island. If you add the percentage of those that are income eligible and interested, and the percentage of other people in Suffolk County, how many people are going to apply? And if you have, as has been said, a lottery, what does that mean? For every 10 units, how many are going to go to the fire, the EMS, the teachers?
No yelling from the audience, thank you. So, sir,
but let me respond to that, because that's it.
We're dealing with this panel, and this panel is answering the questions. So do you have two questions that you want this panel to answer?
I didn't understand that it was simply a question and answer period.
No,
I thought it was a forum to express community questions and concerns.
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm just expressing my concerns, which is that now is not yet the time, given the lack of broader consideration of the issues and studies relating to those issues, to be giving 28 years of $500 to $750 to $1 million, whatever it is, dollars a year. Hopefully, come next year or whenever, maybe we can have studies done, maybe we can have a fuller plan, but I don't think we have that now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Any more questions?
Mary, I have to go. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for participating today and for inviting me to be here. So if anybody has follow-up questions about the state law, feel free to contact my office. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Fred.
Oh, sorry. So sorry.
Hi, everybody. I am Lisa Weimer. Thanks for your service to the community, and thanks to the EMTs and fire and teachers here, too. My question, the door to this question was open. That's what I want to ask about it. Why, and I guess this is for Amber, why don't you put on the ballot professional EMT firefighters? I think this community, especially given the number of seniors, would fund that. Why isn't that something that's on the town ballot, the next referendum? I think we need professional staff here. I personally was taken away by EMS. They did a great job, but they were volunteers. I think we should improve the health of this community. And the second question is, why not add funding for the school? There should be more after-school programs. I think those of us who have second homes here care a lot about the island, and just because we may be against this vague plan, doesn't mean we don't want to see more infrastructure for the island supporting the community. And then finally, in terms of the clarity, why can't you just give us a one-pager telling us how many people you want to house, where, and how much it's going to cost? Why does it have to be this ongoing slush fund? And then finally, I guess the lottery. Who would be eligible for the lottery? Who would conduct the lottery? How would we know it was being done impartially? And would all government
employees be recused from that lottery, because in the past, people have sold government property and made a profit. So I guess those are my questions. Any of you may answer them.
Thank you.
Does anybody want to take
I'll take the first one on the budget. The budget process is ongoing at the moment, and we are hoping to finalize the preliminary budget either tomorrow or Tuesday. And then there'll be a public hearing, and I can't remember exactly which date that public hearing is set for. But the EMT, the increase that we've had to put in the budget is within the current budget that's being drafted. And so it's not something that has to go to public vote. The budget gets adopted by the town board, but there is a public hearing for public input. So that's the legislative process for adopting budgets in the town. And same with recreation programs. If you have a specific need, talk to Bethany or the director of recreation department. She is always open to new ideas. Oh,
was there any other questions in there that you wanted us to address? So there's a lot. There's a lot in there.
Stand up here and say it.
There's just a lot.
Specifics about how the lottery will be conducted. And for example, would you have to be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident to qualify?
Yes. So what I can tell you is that we have to comply with federal fair housing law, right? So there is, you'll see in the plan and then in some of the literature that the way that the legislation is written, that there's the Suffolk County guidelines around the income. Many of you have seen that. People feel how they feel about it. That's where it is. The other thing that we have to do is we have to comply with federal fair housing law. Now, just to be really frank, because of the demographic makeup of our community, we cannot limit it to just folks that live and work here. Why is that? And that is because of the racial makeup of the community. We are majority white. That is just federal law. We can feel how we feel about it. That is what it is. Now, what I can tell you about the lottery is I can tell you that we can prioritize. We have to accept folks into the lottery because we have to comply with federal fair housing, but we can prioritize those folks that live and work in the community, and what we're trying to do is we're trying to explore how we can best serve what the community told us, that they want to serve this fire, they want to serve the EMT, they want to serve the teachers, they want this housing to serve those folks who live and work in our community, and also comply with federal fair housing. So whether that's, mentally I imagine they have those hoppers with ping pong balls, right? So we have to allow everyone in, right? Because that's just federal law, right? But what we can do is maybe how it's kind of been explained to me, and maybe you tell me if I got it wrong, but you could add an extra ping pong ball if you're a firefighter or you live and work. You get an extra chance, or you can kind of address it that way. And so that's the intention of this board.
I just want to address one small thing that you said. The Community Housing Fund would be very similar to the Community Preservation Fund. It's not a slush fund per se. It's not anyone really writing a blank check. It really is to be managed long after all of us are gone as an independent entity that would take care of everything, including how to set up a lottery, how to manage rentals, how to abide by whatever our zoning laws are. All of that is stuff that would be independently done. There's not a situation in which one individual on the town board would somehow have access to money that they can use. It would have a similar setup to Community Preservation Fund, which has been wildly successful over the many years that we've had it.
Yeah, and they deal with, quite frankly, 4 times the money. I mean, that board has done amazing work.
Thank you.
So can I just add one thing about the lottery process? If we may work with something like a housing authority. So Southampton Housing Authority has done this process. East Hampton has done this process. Southampton's list is like 90%. They have thousands of people on the list. It's 90% local residents. It's like 10% people who used to live there and want to come back. And that's the reality for all of these towns.
It's very self-selecting. You know what I mean? Like it's self-selecting. It's not like people suddenly go, hey, wow, there's this place, Shelter Island. I'd love to get an apartment over there. I mean, people want to be where their people are. So, yeah.
Thank you. And ma'am, you have a question and lean into the mic. Thank you.
It's more statements than questions. Can everybody hear me?
Right. Lean into the panel to say.
Okay. But when the back is screaming, they can't hear back there. But I'll try my best. Okay. So my statements are that the Community Preservation Fund was put in place to protect water, the land, and the animals. The Community Housing Fund is there to protect the people, the workers, and the volunteers. As much as people think that it's going to get out of control, it can't. Economically, and I've written this in the paper, if anybody read it, economically, environmentally, financially, it cannot get out of control. Suffolk County steps in and tells us where we are allowed to put in wells. We've tried before and they turned us down. So obviously they know what they're doing and they will be in place to tell us where these things can happen. If you look at the numbers, I know somebody was mentioning that there's a very high number of accessory dwellings. I don't know the acronym for it. I'm not sure where all of those rentals were when I was looking for a place. So you can, and thank you for the laughter because it's definitely putting me at ease for a little while. You can say that they're there, but unless they're there when you are in need, they're not. They're 100% not. And when I was looking and people were offering to house my children so that they could stay and finish school, this is a serious situation. I knew that I would have to leave and probably go live with my parents upstate, but because my kids wanted to stay, people were offering bedrooms in their houses for them to stay. I don't know where those accessory dwellings are. They did not come my way when I was needing one. I'm sorry. My daughter is about to die. Last point. When you're in a home and you own that home, you're in a completely different situation than the people who are not. We're not asking for a handout, and I do say we because I am voting yes because I've been running for 24 years. When you're in the situation where you're uncertain about how long you can stay where you are and how long you can stay at your job because of your living proximity, it's a completely different story. It is very easy, and I'm not condemning the people with the way that they think, but it's very easy to think of it as a different way when you already have a steady place to live compared to those who don't. And unless we're able to step into their shoes and have a conversation with them, you may never understand. Thank you.
We're going to take one more question because it's 4:45, and I have some emails to be read. It's 28:05. Do you want to come up then? All right, and then... well, it's you want to address the panel. I know. You want to address the panel. You can go right into that.
Well, prove it. I am addressing the panel.
And your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Seth Clark. My family goes back to the 1700s here, and I just found several interesting things. And I just want to encourage this committee. There's an acronym. Be careful not to have analysis to paralysis. And I think there may be some of that might be asked of you at this point. I know you've put a lot of time into it, a lot of effort.
the family goes back to the 1700s, and I came back from 5 years in college and 8.5 years in the Air Force in 1976. And shortly after that, Len Bliss, the head supervisor, asked me to chair an affordable housing committee. That was in 1980, I think, when Len was here. And we had a very good plan, and it was very similar to what you had. This is much more comprehensive, but we had opportunities for rentals and purchases and some town-owned lands, and we had HUD money that was going to be pretty much available. And the then supervisor, Len Bliss, not one again, and the then supervisor had a view that I think a lot of people are going to this have, and it's a little different than what I had about Shovel Island and people on the committee, and about the need of the vitality, the need of the school, the need of volunteers, and the need of the special community that I chose to come back to, and people who were here chose to come back to. So my point is only this, that don't be discouraged because people see it differently, because that's what America is about. But we need to do something, and it doesn't need to be later. What you're putting together as a referendum is a way to fund, a vehicle to fund a plan that will come later. I've been on boards like you. I was in the school board. I chaired the committee to build this new school wing. I've been on town committees. And at some point, you have to make a decision. You have to say, we'll do it or we're not going to do it. And to wait because a few people see it differently is not leadership. I challenge you to leadership, keep this thing going forward. I know how people in Shovel Island put committees together. I know all the questions. These fine people out here, and all good questions. I know those questions are going to be addressed by pretty much anybody who's willing to serve on a committee like this. And you'll get it right. The details will be right. But we have to have at some point at which here's a vehicle to fund it, and then put forward a plan that is thought through the community. And I've been here long enough to know folks that are afraid of trusting the people in these committees. I've been here a long time. These committees work hard for you and for me and for all the people in this town that are not agenda-driven. These people all have different paradigms, and they will get it right, and the committee behind them will get it right. Let's just give them the platform to do it. I'm going to vote yes.
Thank you.
Well, I'm pretty short, so I'll keep this down.
And your name?
My name is Lynn Weichert, and I've lived on this island part-time since 1972 when my kids were in the Coalfields, and I now live here full-time. There's a whole bunch of us that have been going door-to-door urging people to say yes for affordable housing. And let me tell you something. There are 5 yeses to every no. This thing is going to pass. Hell yes. And one of the things that strikes me is the kinds of questions I get asked. And I've heard all of these questions, but most of the questions are, how soon can this happen? I'm really desperate for housing. My kids can't live here. I'm a renter. I have to leave in May. It's a different set of questions because there are only a couple people here who really represent that, all those affordable people who need affordable housing. So I would really encourage you to think that, whereas here you might hear a fair number of no people talking, out there, it's almost all yeses.
Thank you. Just to finalize, to give voice to the people that emailed in questions, so this is for the panel just to record. Page 9, income levels are set very high, 174.360 for one or two person. That will make a lot of people eligible. Who and how do you decide who gets them and who doesn't?
Do you want me to, sorry, Mary, do you want us to just answer them?
No, I just want them to be, do you want to have them recorded or do you want it written?
No, please record. Sorry, I didn't understand.
Yeah, just so that they all get in there. Some of them are repeats that have been brought up, so it's just honoring their effort. The draft plan posted on the town website speaks of encouragement of development in areas where transportation, public water, and public sewer infrastructure are available. Where and how will this be achieved? What is the plan for long-term implementation to stay affordable, rent or own, and how do you evaluate that? How do you evaluate incomes for people using them and how often? How many family units completed a Shelter Island Community Housing Interest Form? Do you think that that number reflects the actual need for community housing? If not, why not? What private-public partnerships are being considered, and will those entities be making a profit or beginning taxpayer money? Sorry about that. And then the last one is a new water district being planned? Is West Neck Water District being expanded or planned or to be expanded? So it's 10 to 5, and I, as a facilitator, want to thank all of you for agreeing to the process today and respecting one another. And it was a very meaningful, successful meeting from this perspective. And I turn it over to Amber. So thank you all so very, very much.
I want to thank you all for coming, and we are listening to, people who want to vote yes and the people who want to vote no, people with criticisms of the plan, people who support the plan. We as a town board truly are listening and will consider all of the comments made today. I want to especially thank the panel members who came up here. It's one thing to run for office and put yourself out there and be under fire. It's another to volunteer on a committee and put yourself out there and be under fire. So huge kudos to all of you for stepping up and trying to do something positive for the community. I wanted to just reiterate what the next steps are. On Tuesday, as I stated earlier, we will have the public hearing on the community housing plan, so that will start about 6:12 after we read all the fun resolutions that everyone always loves to sit through. And then we will, listen to comments there, comments from here, and then, decide what to do with the plan and how to keep moving it forward. Once it is adopted at some point in the future, it will be given back to the Community Housing Board. It won't be given to the Town Board. It will go back to the Community Housing Board to then work on prioritizing and setting out timelines for making things happen. And there will be steps at every turn that involves the community. If we're going to be spending funds, whether the Community Housing Fund is funded by donations, by the transfer tax, by grant monies, when those monies need to be spent, there will be public hearings on how that money gets spent. So if there's land purchases, anything that, legislative that needs to be done, there will be opportunities for people to get further, have their voice further heard. There's secret that needs to be done. There's going to be more consultants to come in and look at different things for us. So this process is a continuing process and will continue to involve public input. And the number of people that participated today love the public input. This is really the best turnout we've had, and I'm so happy that you all came. So thank you.